My name is Marilyn Rhodes. I was rinsing dishes when the notification buzzed. Just a simple ping. One of those everyday sounds that usually means a discount ad or someone tagging me in a photo I didn't ask to be in. I dried my hands, glanced at my phone, and saw his name, Ethan. My son. My breath caught. I thought, finally. I hadn't heard from him in weeks. Not since he and Melanie announced the final wedding date. I opened it with a flick of hope. But what I read, it didn't make sense. Not at first. Hey mom, I think it'll be easier if you just watch through the live stream, okay? That was it. No greeting, no explanation, just those cold, clipped words that scraped against my chest like gravel. I read it again. Then a third time. My knees gave a little. I leaned against the counter, rereading like maybe I'd missed something. Maybe it was a joke, a mistake. But no, my son, the boy I once carried through hospital corridors when he couldn't breathe, the one I stayed up with during long, wheezing nights, was now telling me, not inviting me, but uninviting me from the biggest day of his life. There was no call, no voice to soften the blow, just the digital silence that follows a betrayal. I stood there in the dim kitchen, blinking at the screen, and all I could feel was a sharp kind of cold. Not the kind that makes you shiver, the kind that makes your bones remember every sacrifice you made. I didn't cry. Not yet. I just whispered his name once, like maybe if I said it soft enough, it would echo back with the boy I once knew, but all I got was silence. He had these tiny hands, always warm, always reaching. That's what I remember most from the early years. His fingers would curl around mine like they trusted me to carry the whole world. And I did. I carried him through every storm, every fever, every broken thing. I stitched our lives back together with whatever thread I had, even when it meant unraveling myself. When his father slammed doors and left bruises not just on walls, but in the air we breathed, I wrapped Ethan in silence and stories. I taught him how to breathe through fear, how to laugh through ache. I remember pressing cool cloths to his forehead during one of his worst asthma attacks, whispering, "You're safe. I've got you." I meant it with my whole being. I had him. I worked double shifts and still made it to every school recital. I packed lunches with handwritten notes tucked inside. I was loud, yes, emotional, always, but only because I loved that boy so fiercely. I forgot to love myself some days. So when people ask if I saw this coming, this email, this uninviting, I say no, because when you've spent your life being someone's anchor, you don't expect to be cut loose. You don't imagine the child you lifted from wreckage will one day look at you like the wreckage itself. But maybe that's what happened. Maybe all my care turned invisible with time. Maybe he outgrew my kind of love. Or maybe someone else taught him it was too messy, too clingy, too much. Still, I remember every scraped knee, every birthday cake I stayed up to decorate. Every time he said, "Thanks, Mom," without even knowing what I gave up to make it all look easy. Love isn't loud because it wants to be. It's loud because it hurts when it's not heard. The first time I met her, she wore white. Not a wedding dress, just a pristine blouse, ironed stiff, not a wrinkle in sight. She shook my hand like she'd practiced it, smiled with all her teeth, said, "So this is the famous Marilyn." I laughed, tried to return the warmth. I offered her pie I'd baked that morning. She declined. Gluten, she said. Or maybe it was sugar, something that disqualified sweetness. She was beautiful, polished, like someone raised in a house where shoes never touched carpet and emotions were folded into drawers. I didn't dislike her, not at first. I just felt small around her, uninvited before I even knew I was being sized up. Over time, I noticed how she watched me too closely, like I was an ingredient that didn't belong in her carefully measured life. Once, when Ethan stepped away, she leaned in and said, "You're very involved." The pause lingered. "You know, emotional." She meant it as a flaw. I smiled, that polite kind of smile you wear when you've been slapped but you're indoors. I told Ethan once gently that she didn't seem to like me. He said, "She's just shy." But shy doesn't roll its eyes when you speak. Shy Doesn't rearrange the seating chart so you're closer to the kitchen than the dance floor. Still, I tried. I bought her flowers on her birthday. I complimented her dress at the engagement dinner, even though she never looked me in the eye. I never wanted to be the mother-in-law from hell. I just wanted to be seen, valued, not tolerated like a pit stain on silk, but deep down I knew I was never going to be her kind of family. She wanted him, not where he came from, just where he was going. They never asked for help, not directly, but I saw quiet gaps between paychecks, the nervous way Ethan avoided eye contact when wedding costs came up. And I knew my boy. I knew the weight on his shoulders before he even spoke of it. So I stepped in, not with lectures or conditions, just action, quiet and visible love. When his student loans mounted, I paid one off anonymously. When he lost his job right before proposing, I wired enough for the trip he had planned so she wouldn't know he was struggling. He told her he'd saved for it. I let him have that pride. Later, when the venue deposit was due and they were reconsidering options, I transferred the full amount. He called me that night, thanking me like I was a bank, not a mother. You didn't have to, he said. I know, that's the thing. I never had to, but I did, not because I wanted applause, not because I wanted power, because I remembered a small boy who once said, "Mom, I want to marry someone just like you, someone who loves really big." And maybe I did love big. So big it made me invisible. They never mentioned me in the speeches, never offered a seat on a planning call. I wasn't a mother anymore. I was a silent investor in a love story I was no longer allowed to appear in, and still I gave. Even when I started to feel the chill, even when I realized they were building something on my back and pretending I was never part of the foundation, they kept my money, but they wanted to erase my presence, and that's when I knew being uninvited wasn't a mistake. It was the final step in their plan to forget me. I didn't sleep much after the email. I'd wake up gasping, as if betrayal had hands and they were pressing down on my chest. I tried to make sense of it, to not take it personal. That's what people say, right? Don't take it personal. But motherhood is nothing but personal. You pour yourself into someone, and when they wring you dry and walk away, it doesn't just sting, it tears something loose inside you. For a while, I debated calling him, thought about driving over, standing on his porch, making him look me in the eye and say it out loud, "You are not welcome." But I knew he wouldn't. He'd fumble, apologize, shift blame, maybe even cry, and somehow, I'd end up comforting him. That's the curse of mothers like me. We don't know how to stop giving, even when we're the ones bleeding. So I didn't call. I made a different decision. I remembered the name of the vineyard they'd chosen. I'd helped with the deposit after all. I knew the date, the location, the capacity. What they didn't know was that the owner was retiring and the property was up for sale. I called. I wired the money. I signed the papers under my maiden name. 2 weeks before the wedding, I became the silent owner of the very ground they planned to wed on. I didn't do it out of spite. I did it to reclaim something, to remind myself that I wasn't just someone to discard, that I had power too. Quiet, steady, patient power. They uninvited me from the guest list, but they forgot I was already part of the foundation, and come wedding day, I would be there, maybe not where they could see me, but right beneath their feet. The morning of the wedding, I didn't cry. I brewed coffee, sat by the window, let the sun fall across my lap like it had every day before this one. And then I dressed simple. Blouse, slacks, a soft cardigan he'd given me to birthdays ago when we still exchanged gifts. I didn't wear makeup, didn't style my hair. I wasn't going to be seen. Not in the way people think of when they picture a wedding guest, but I was going to be present. I drove to the vineyard early, parked in the back where the gravel was still uneven. The manager, a lovely woman named Camille who didn't know the full story, led me to the owner's box, a room above the ceremony lawn with large windows and an old leather armchair tucked in the corner. I sat down alone, the hum of the vineyard below rising like a quiet tide. Guests arrived. Laughter, floated upward. Photographers clicked like insects. I saw familiar faces, his childhood friends, my sister, even the neighbor who once watched Ethan when I worked late nights. None of them knew I was here. None of them looked up. Then I saw him, my son, tall, nervous, beautiful in a way only mothers see, like a living scrapbook of every age he's ever been. He adjusted his tie, smiled at the officiant, and then Melanie appeared, gliding down the aisle like a woman walking into a future she believed she built all on her own. I didn't sob. I didn't scream. I just watched. They'd asked me to disappear, and I had almost, but here I was, above them, heart thudding steady. Not a ghost, a witness, not to their union, but to my own endurance. The ceremony moved like a painting, beautiful, careful, hollow in its perfection. Words were said, vows exchanged, smiles held like poses, but my ears waited for one moment, one breath I knew was coming. And when the officiant paused, cleared his throat, and said, "If anyone objects to this union, speak now or forever hold your peace," my breath caught, time slowed, my fingers curled into my lap. I felt my pulse in my throat, my ears, my chest. A whole life of love swelled in that silence. I could have stood, could have shouted, could have raised every forgotten sacrifice like a flag in the wind, but I didn't, not because I wasn't angry, not because I wasn't shattered, because I was more than that. I was tired, tired of being the only one who remembered, tired of fighting for space at a table I helped set, tired of translating love into money, into patience, into silence, and still being told I was too much. So I let the moment pass, let the words hang in the air like a dare no one took. I didn't need to object. My very existence was an objection. My presence unseen, but absolute, was louder than any words I could have spoken, and I knew it. I saw Melanie glance up briefly, unsettled, like she felt a shift. Maybe it was the wind, maybe it was the chill of a truth too close to name. I stayed in that chair, unmoving, while they sealed their vows with a kiss. Let them have their perfect moment. Let them pretend history didn't have a pulse, but deep in that pause, just before they said "I do," there was a silence that belonged to me, and I let it thunder. It started somewhere near the middle rows. A slight turn of a head, a hand lifted, pointing upward. Then another. I saw the ripple move through the crowd like a breeze bending tall grass, slow, uncertain, then undeniable. Whispers, not loud enough to stop anything, but sharp enough to shift the air. "She's here, is that?" I thought she wasn't invited. And then Melanie looked up. I saw it hit her, not all at once, no. First, confusion, then recognition, then something colder. Not fear exactly, but that familiar twitch in her jaw, the one I'd seen the day she told me I was too emotional. She looked at me like I was a smudge on her perfect picture, a shadow she couldn't crop out. Ethan followed her gaze. For one brief second, his eyes met mine, and everything we hadn't said lived in that look. I didn't smile, didn't wave. I just met his stare with something softer, sadder, the kind of gaze a mother gives when she knows she's lost something, but refuses to let it be taken with shame. He looked away first. Of course he did. I watched them continue. Rings exchanged, applause scattered like birdseed, everyone pretending nothing had shifted, but I knew it had. My presence had found its way in, not through confrontation, but through quiet weight, because even when you erase someone from your plans, even when you scrub their name from invitations and photo lists, love doesn't vanish. It haunts. It lingers. It shows up, silently, in the places you swore it never would. I didn't ruin their wedding. I just reminded them you can close the doors, but you cannot keep out the mother who built the walls. The day after the wedding, my phone didn't ring. No missed calls. No sorry texts. No thank you for the deposit. The trip, the years, just stillness. Online, the photos began to roll in. Filtered perfection, her dress, the vineyard drenched in golden light, Ethan's hand resting gently at the small of her back. I recognized every corner, every flower arch, every stone. I had walked that land weeks before they had, signed the deeds, paid the gardener, smoothed the earth they stood on. Not once did anyone tag me. Not a single caption hinted that I had anything to do with it. They wrote things like blessed and surrounded by love. I sat with that one for a long time. People messaged me, cousins, old friends, even my neighbor. We didn't see you, they wrote. Were you out of town? I told them I had the best seat in the house. They thought I was joking. Maybe I was, maybe I wasn't. Ethan didn't reach out. Not even after I knew he'd seen me. Maybe he was ashamed. Maybe he was relieved. Or maybe worst of all, he felt nothing at all. But I felt everything, the ache, the pride, the echo of a goodbye that had never been said aloud. I didn't want to ruin his day. I wanted to see the man I raised take a step into the life he chose. Even if he chose it without me, even if he forgot whose hand steadied him when he learned how to walk. They celebrated their beginning, and I mourned the ending I didn't ask for. Love, when silenced, doesn't vanish. It just moves underground, quiet as roots, but just as alive. A week after the wedding, I returned to the vineyard alone. No flowers, no white chairs, just silence and soil and the soft rustle of vines in the wind. I took off my shoes, let my feet sink into the earth I now owned, the earth they danced on, the earth they toasted their love on, the earth they believed belonged to someone else. I walked slowly, breathing it all in, not the loss, but the reminder of who I was before the titles, before too loud, before too involved, before uninvited. Marilyn Rhodes, not just a mother, a woman who gave her whole self and then gave more. I stood in the middle of the lawn, arms folded, eyes closed, not for drama, not for grief, but to feel something true, something mine. They never knew, they never asked, but this land, this foundation, it remembers. It holds the weight of every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every check quietly written and never cashed in for thanks. They can live their version of the story. They can frame the day just how they want it, clean edges, pretty filters, no room for mess or mothers who love too fiercely, but deep beneath it, my fingerprints remain. In the bricks, in the vines, in the quiet corners where real love hides. When people ask if I regret it, watching from above, staying silent, not making a scene, I say no, because I didn't need to crash their fairy tale. I am the reason it could be built at all. Let them forget my name, let them erase me from pictures, but they'll never change the truth. You can uninvite me from the moment, but not from the story, because I am the ground they're standing on, and I am not going anywhere.